Namaskar, a warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is VC Pramod and with me is Renuka RS, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India says Arunachal Pradesh has always been and will always remain an inalienable part of the country. Hopes China will work constructively with India to resolve outstanding friction points along the LAC. New Delhi asserts its commitment to supply life-saving medicines along with 50,000 metric tons of wheat as humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. Indian cabinet approves signing of an MOU with Nepal for construction of a bridge over Mahakali River at Dharchula. US President Joe Biden accuses Donald Trump for trying to prevent peaceful transfer of power as a violent mob breached the Capitol. 13 security personnel reportedly killed in the violent clashes in Kazakhstan. In cricket, South Africa beat India by 7 wickets in the second test to level the test series 1-1 in Johannesburg. And BCCI announces Indian squad for Women's World Cup and series with New Zealand. As India marches towards administering 150 crore vaccine doses against COVID-19, news about the new corona variant is a cause for concern. In this situation, we appeal to our listeners to get fully vaccinated at the earliest and help others get vaccinated. Please continue to follow these 3 simple steps to stay safe. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID information and guidance, contact the national helpline number 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. India reiterated that Arunachal Pradesh has always been and will always remain an inalienable part of India. Briefing media in New Delhi on Thursday, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi hoped that instead of engaging in antics like renaming parts of Arunachal Pradesh, China will work constructively with India to resolve the outstanding friction points.
We had seen reports of the Chinese side naming some places in Arunachal Pradesh last week. We had at that time conveyed our views on such a ridiculous exercise to support untenable territorial claims, calling Tuting as Taudang or River Shiom as Shiyuemu or even Kibitu as Daba does not alter the fact that Arunachal Pradesh has always been and will always remain an inalienable part of India. We hope that instead of engaging in such antics, China will work constructively with us to resolve the outstanding friction points in areas along the western sector of the line of actual control in India-China border areas.
Regarding reports of a bridge being made by China on Pangong Lake, Mr. Bagchi said Indian government is monitoring this closely. He said this bridge is being constructed in areas that have been under illegal occupation by China for around 60 years. He added that government is taking steps to ensure that India's security interests are protected. On Chinese embassy writing to Indian members of parliament on their participation at an event, the spokesperson said the substance, tone and tenor of the letter are inappropriate. He said the Chinese side should not note that India is a vibrant democracy and Indian parliamentarians as representatives of people undertake activities as per their beliefs. He further stated that India expects the Chinese side to refrain from hyping the normal activities by Indian MPs and further complicate the situation in bilateral relations.
The External Affairs Ministry on Thursday said that India has taken up with Sri Lanka the detention of 68 fishermen and 10 boats that are in custody of Sri Lankan authorities since last month. Briefing media in New Delhi, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said these detained fishermen have been provided the necessary support by officials from Indian Consulate General in Jaffna, including clothes and essentials. Besides facilitating phone calls with their relatives, they have also been provided legal representation.
The High Commission of India in Colombo has taken up the issue of early release of these Indian fishermen with the Sri Lankan authorities. As a result of these efforts, 12 fishermen have now been released. The High Commission is making arrangements for their early repatriation. The High Commission is also engaged with the Sri Lankan authorities for the early release of remaining fishermen and their boats.
On Sri Lankan cabinet clearing Trincomalee oil tank farms. The spokesperson said energy security is an important area of bilateral cooperation with Sri Lanka.
Energy security is an important area of our bilateral cooperation with Sri Lanka. We are in consultation with the government of Sri Lanka for the modernization of the Trincomalee tank farms. This will allow for storage of fuel and will augment bilateral energy security.
New Delhi has said that Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. Responding to queries on Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan raising the Jammu and Kashmir issue on international fora, External Affairs Minister's spokesperson Arindam Bagchi on Thursday said Mr. Khan is the Prime Minister of a country which openly supports cross-border terrorism and which sheltered terrorist Osama bin Laden. On SAARC summit, Mr. Bagchi said there is still no consensus that would permit the holding of the summit. Replying to another query, the spokesperson said India has committed to supply life-saving medicines along with 50,000 metric tons of wheat as humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. In this regard, India is in discussion with Pakistan authorities on the correct modalities for shipment of wheat.
The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs in New Delhi has approved MOU between India and Nepal for construction of a bridge over Mahakali River at Dharchula in India and Dharchula in Nepal. As close neighbors, India and Nepal share unique ties of friendship and cooperation characterized by an open border and deep-rooted people-to-people contacts of kinship and culture. The Cabinet also approved the signing of agreement between India and Spain on cooperation and mutual assistance in customs matters. The agreement will help in making available, reliable, quick and cost-effective information and intelligence for the prevention and investigation of customs offences and apprehending of custom offenders. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar spoke to his Nepalese counterpart Narayan Khadka over phone on Thursday. In a tweet, Dr. Jaishankar said it was an opportunity to recognize progress on many fronts. He said India-Nepal development partnership and COVID collaboration have been noteworthy. He said they agreed to broaden the vistas of bilateral cooperation. The External Affairs Minister also spoke to his Nigerian counterpart, Jeffrey Onyema. They conveyed greetings for 2022 and reviewed the development of the special relationship between India and Nigeria. Dr. Jaishankar said he is looking forward to an early joint commission meeting at Abuja.
The Indian Cabinet has approved the signing of MOU between India and Turkmenistan on cooperation in the field of disaster management. The MOU seeks to put in place a system under which both India and Turkmenistan will be benefited from the disaster management mechanisms of each other. It will help in strengthening the areas of preparedness, response and capacity building in the field of disaster management. This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts. United States President Joe Biden on Thursday accused his predecessor, Donald Trump, of posing a continuing threat to American democracy in a speech on the anniversary of the deadly U.S. Capitol attack by Trump supporters who tried to overturn his 2020 election defeat. Speaking at the white-domed building that was the scene of the January 6, 2021 riot, Mr. Biden warned that Trump's false claims that the election was stolen from him through widespread voting fraud could unravel the rule of law and undermine future elections. He said, "We must be absolutely clear about what is true and what is a lie." The speech was a departure for Biden, who has spent most of his first year in office focused on pursuing his own agenda rather than looking backward. Biden added that for the first time in our history, a president had not just lost the election, he tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. He condemned Trump for watching the riot on television and doing nothing for hours. 4 people died in the hours-long chaos, while 1 police officer died the day after battling rioters, and 4 later died by suicide. Around 140 police officers were injured. U.S. prosecutors have brought criminal charges against at least 725 people linked to the riot, though so far they have not charged Trump or his associates.
In Kazakhstan, the government has restored the vehicle fuel price caps for 6 months, days after deadly unrest in the Almaty and other parts of the country. Petrol and diesel prices will also be capped for the same period. The move comes in the wake of a series of demonstrations over oil price hike in the country. According to reports, several protesters were killed while 13 security personnel lost their lives in the protests on Wednesday. The violent demonstrations saw government buildings stormed and set ablaze. State television reported that 13 security officers had been killed while 353 others were injured in the unrest. The health ministry said that 1,000 people had been injured. Protesters took to the streets again in the country's largest city, Almaty, a day after breaking into the presidential residence and the mayor's office there. Interior Ministry said that 2,000 people have been arrested. Back home, India's Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson said Indian Embassy is closely monitoring ongoing developments in Kazakhstan, particularly from the perspective of the safety of Indian nationals. Veteran Chinese diplomat Zhang Ming has taken over as the new Secretary General of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO from the 1st of January. 65-year-old Zhang took over the reins of Beijing-based SCO from Vladimir Norov, a former diplomat from Uzbekistan who completed his term on the 31st of December. Before joining the SCO, Zhang served for 4 years as the head of the Chinese mission to the European Union. Responding to a question, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbing said that according to the rules and as approved by the Council of Heads of States of the SCO, Zhang Ming has assumed the role for a term of 3 years from January 1st this year.
Amid ongoing diplomatic and economic tests between China and Lithuania over the issue of the de facto Taiwanese embassy, Taiwan said it would set up a $200 million fund to invest in Lithuania. It said this is to help Lithuania with their difficulties owing to the Chinese diplomatic and trade pressure. China downgraded its diplomatic relations with Lithuania after Lithuania allowed Taiwan to open a de facto embassy there, a potential sign of growing ties. China has denied blocking trade from Lithuania, which would breach global trading rules, but according to media reports, the European Union has said it has verified reports of goods being held up at Chinese customs. In today's edition of Hotspot, we have a discussion on the India-Germany and India-EU ties and the roads ahead. The participants are Bhaswati Mukherjee, former ambassador, and Simran Sori, journalist.
We are discussing India-Germany relationships, and we see that Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday spoke to the new German Chancellor, and both leaders discussed the existing bilateral relationship and also how this relationship will go in future, and there will be new areas of cooperation like climate change. Ambassador Mukherjee, when we see the change of guard in Germany and we see that Merkel has left after a really long time at the helm of affairs and we have a new chancellor in Germany, how do you see this for India-Germany relations as one goes forward?
I see this change as a win-win situation for India, and that is not to say that Angela Merkel was not a great German chancellor who's left her place in German history. But from the perspective of India's new strategic priorities, including the Indo-Pacific, there is no doubt that the outgoing chancellor, the former chancellor, Angela Merkel, had always put Germany's commercial interests and that of the robust automobile industry, which has a huge market in China, ahead of the EU's desire to forge a robust Indo-Pacific strategy that would be in sync with the Quad and India on Indo-Pacific. The new German chancellor does not have those reservations with regard to the Indo-Pacific, and we would expect, therefore, to find Germany being much more supportive within the EU on this issue and also taking a lead role along with France, because earlier it was just France that was leading the European Union and dragging along a very reluctant Germany. That is going to change dramatically in the weeks and months to come.
Ambassador Mukherjee, do you feel that the fact that the world has been hit by the pandemic and the coronavirus, and we have seen Europe really struggling with the virus even now currently, which we see, do you feel that this slowing down of global economies somewhere also translates into maybe a slowing down of this bilateral trade, or do you think this is something which is happening globally and bilaterally this really doesn't kick in?
I don't think it's going to impact the bilateral trade. The pandemic has also been manipulated, if I may say so, by the huge Western pharma industry who've actually made a killing. Vaccines which are available in the West have not been shared, for instance, with the African continent as they should have, which is against the principle of globalization. India, on the other hand, has shared whatever it had, reached its hand out, including for medicines. So as far as the COVID pandemic is concerned, one of the main problems that Europe is facing, Germany, France, and also particularly Eastern Europe, is the vaccine hesitancy, which is therefore overwhelming the vaccinated population because the infections are spreading very fast. We do look forward to cooperating with Germany on our robust bilateral relationship. We have got a huge interest with Germany, with German companies. German companies have invested heavily in India. We don't see that changing. And we are actually hoping that the present so-called wave will diminish given the fact that we have the South African example where it peaked quite fast. And therefore, we are hoping that given the fact that we are vaccinating now our young people, it will peak fast. It will not hit India's economy and it should not affect the economic relationship that we have with Germany, which in fact is right on the top as far as India-EU relations are concerned, economic relations.
Ambassador Mukherjee, when we look at India-Germany relations and we look at India-EU relations, or for example, today we look at any relationship between world powers globally, the one factor that does manage to creep in is China. And we've seen a very aggressive growth of China. We've also seen China's actions, whether it is with India on its borders or in South China Sea, its continuing feud with the US. How do you think the China factor plays in when it comes to ties between India and Germany and also the ties between India and EU? Because whether it is Germany, whether it is India or it is EU, we all have to tackle a China according to our own national interests, but also in a way globally and in a unified fashion.
Actually, that is the crux of the problem. One of the issues that we've had with the EU is that because its common foreign and security policy has to be by consensus, the policy that the EU had earlier adopted, which was to have some kind of balanced dialogue with Russia and not drive Russia into China's ready arms, has been overtaken by the visceral hostility that some of the Central Asian, Eastern European and Baltic countries have towards Russia. As a result, the Chinese have benefited on both sides. On one hand, because within the EU, there are countries that want to continue a separate, robust economic relationship with China and who believe that Russia is a bigger threat to international peace and security than China. This kind of hostility has therefore made a recalcitrant Russia very, very hostile vis-a-vis the European Union. We are actually hoping that with the new German Chancellor and a better balanced perspective towards China, the entire European Union will understand that it does not make sense to drive Russia into China's arms, to understand that China today is the biggest threat to international peace and security, including in the Indo-Pacific, and that this threat must be tackled together by the West and the emerging countries and the Quad, which includes India. So we're hoping that the EU will be able to give a better leadership position vis-a-vis countering an aggressive China, which is now making threatening noises in areas which are fundamental to the West's interests, and that includes the Indo-Pacific, because the Indo-Pacific today is the biggest center of trade and commerce for the entire European Union, including Germany.
Ambassador Mukherjee, we've also seen that India and EU have long been engaged in the talks for an FTA, a free trade agreement. And after Brexit, Britain is also pursuing a similar path in connection with EU, with India. How much is hurdle an FTA between India and EU, and how much do you think needs to be done to push this forward so that the FTA can come in place and we can actually get some work done, because this has been in the talks for a very long time now?
Actually, Simran, it is not an FTA. It's called the BTIA. It's called the Bilateral Trade and Investment Agreement. And that is the reason why it has not yet been adopted, because India has never negotiated such a wide-ranging BTIA with a huge developed bloc which wants us to give concessions without giving any in return, and is not willing to settle for a limited FTA, which we would have been happy to accept, which would have looked at areas where it is possible for a give and take and to have a limited free trade agreement. As far as UK is concerned, it was the UK that was one of the greatest impediments, if I may say so, to a BTIA with the EU, because the areas of strength between the Indian economy and the UK economy are quite similar. And therefore, the British were not willing that the EU would give any concessions with regard to those sectors of the economy, because we are both service economies, India and UK, and they did not want any concessions to be given. That problem will also haunt the negotiations between a bilateral FTA this time between UK and India, but we have to see how that moves along. But certainly it would be easier now with the departure of UK, the definitive departure after Brexit. It will be much easier for India to negotiate not such a broad-based agreement maybe, but a more limited agreement which we could call free trade and leave investment out of it. Or have two separate agreements, one on free trade and one on investment, if and when that is possible. We were actually, if I may add, we were on the verge of finalizing such an agreement towards the middle of the tenure of former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. But at that time, the EU went into a huge economic crisis. There was a meltdown of the bank. There was a possible Brexit. There was a run on the euro. So all the concessions that they had offered us and which we had accepted and we had given concessions in return had to be put in cold storage. When they came back to us many years later, we were in no position to accept the limited concessions they were giving us after such a long gap. So we are still now back to the drawing board. But as I said, now one is much more optimistic because one of the main impediments, that is the United Kingdom, is no longer in the bloc.
With this, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Sensex and the Nifty today declined around 1%. Both stocks fell amid negative global cues. The Sensex closed near 59,600 points, while the Nifty settled near the 17,750 level. A report from the Business World.
The BSE Sensex plunged 621 points or 1.03% to trade at 59,602. The NSE Nifty declined 179 points or 1% to trade at 17,746. Majority of Asian stocks logged losses after the Federal Reserve signaled the possibility of faster than expected US rate hikes and stimulus withdrawal. On the other hand, 2- and 5-year Treasury yields in the US surged to multi-year highs. European markets also tumbled in the intraday. Oil prices rose sharply, extending a rally from the previous session on escalating unrest in OPEC Plus oil producer Kazakhstan and supply outages in Libya. Brent crude was trading around $81.70 per barrel. Nishit Kumar for World News, All India Radio.
Bangladesh has discovered huge potential natural gas hydrate deposits of 0.11 to 0.73 trillion cubic feet TCF in its exclusive economic zone area. It is equivalent to 17 to 103 TCF of natural gas reserves. This finding was shared by the Foreign Minister of Bangladesh, Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen, in Dhaka on Wednesday, reports the news agency UNB. The study, undertaken over the last 3 years, was conducted by Petrobangla, BAPEX, local experts and the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton, UK. The study has come up with the preliminary idea about the location and nature of the gas hydrate discovery.
French regulators have hit Google and Facebook with $237 million in fines over their use of cookies, the data used to track users online, authorities said on Thursday. US tech giants, including the likes of Apple and Amazon, have come under growing pressure over their businesses practices across Europe, where they have faced massive fines and plans to impose far-reaching EU rules on how they operate. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Globe and Mail says Canada posts trade surplus of $3.13 billion in November, highest since 2008. The Guardian writes that Italy has made it obligatory for people aged 50 or more to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Sputnik News reports mayhem in Kazakhstan, police officers beheaded, stores looted, hospitals surrounded. Financial Times says Russian-led alliance says it will send peacekeepers to Kazakhstan over protests. The Wall Street Journal notes Hong Kong bans flights, shuts nightlife after Omicron bursts pandemic-free bubble. South China Morning Post reports Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam slams officials for attending birthday party. Over 100 guests, including suspected COVID-19 patients, vows appropriate actions. Toro News says Kazakh president seeks help from Russia-led security bloc. The Japan Times writes Japan seeks restrictions on U.S. troop movements as Okinawa reports record cases.
In cricket, South Africa beat India by 7 wickets in the second test at the Wanderers in Johannesburg to level the 3-match series 1-1 today. Chasing the victory target of 240 runs set by India, South Africa achieved the target in 67.4 overs. They made 243 for 3. South Africa skipper Dean Elgar was the hero for the home team for his unbeaten 96-run knock. He was declared player of the match. For India, Mohammad Shami, Shardul Thakur and Ravichandran Ashwin picked 1 wicket each. These scores: India 202 and 266, South Africa 202 and 243 for 3 in 67.4 overs. The third and final test begins in Cape Town from January 11th. India had won the opening test, beating the host by 113 runs in Centurion to take a 1-0 lead in the 3-test match series. The Board of Control for Cricket in India has announced Indian women's squad for the ICC Women's World Cup 2022 and the New Zealand series. Mithali Raj will lead the 15-member squad with Harmanpreet Kaur named as a deputy for the World Cup. The other players are Smriti Mandhana, Shefali Verma, Yastika Bhatia, Deepti Sharma, Richa Ghosh, wicketkeeper, Sneh Rana, Jhulan Goswami, Pooja Vastrakar, Meghna Singh, Renuka Singh Thakur, Tania Bhatia, wicketkeeper, Rajeshwari Gaikwad and Poonam Yadav. Standby players are Shabini Meghana, Ekta Bhisht and Simran Dil Bahadur. Team India played their first World Cup fixture against Pakistan on March 6, 2022 at the Bay Oval, Tauranga.
World number 1 tennis player Novak Djokovic will be detained in a hotel until Monday after he was denied entry to Australia in a row over vaccine exemption. 34-year-old Djokovic was given a medical exemption to play in the Australian Open, but border officials said it did not meet the country's entry requirements. The star was detained at Melbourne Airport for several hours on Wednesday before being taken to a government detention hotel while his lawyers launched an urgent appeal in court. A full hearing regarding Djokovic's visa is set to take place on Monday, but the Australian government could seek a ruling to deport him before then.
A quick look at the headlines once again. India says Arunachal Pradesh has always been and will always remain an inalienable part of the country. Hopes China will work constructively with India to resolve outstanding friction points along the LAC. New Delhi asserts its commitment to supply life-saving medicines along with 50,000 metric tons of wheat as humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. Indian Cabinet approves signing of an MOU with Nepal for construction of a bridge over Mahakali River at Dharchula. US President Joe Biden accuses Donald Trump for trying to prevent peaceful transfer of power as a violent mob breached the capital. 13 security personnel reportedly killed in the violent clashes in Kazakhstan. In cricket, South Africa beat India by 7 wickets in the second test to level the test series 1-1 in Johannesburg. And BCCI announces Indian squad for Women's World Cup and series with New Zealand. And now to end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Jan, by artists from Nepal. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News. Namaskar.